Good morning, students. This is a video recording of how to properly annotate and kind of what our annotating method is going to be with this class. This is the second lesson after following up with the purpose of writing, but can be reviewed anytime as long as you need it, okay? So what are the four key features of writing? This is something that we covered about a week ago, and this is that PAPA acronym. So it is purpose, which is that verb word, right? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to inform, persuade, entertain, convince? Audience. Who is being addressed? Is that a classroom? Is that the president? Is that a senator? Is it your girlfriend, your boss? Persona. How are you trying to come across? Do you want to come across as if you have authority, as if you are smart, as if you are dumb, silly? Any of those things, right? Think about being an actor and actress. What is your character's, almost kind of defining trait, right? How do you want to come across? And then finally, the argument, the claim, or the main idea. And remember, we have to have all four of these things working cohesively and together well. They all have to support each other. And that is the key to strong writing and to strong speeches, to strong communication, okay? And that's what, once we're finishing how to annotate and learning how to annotate, and once we annotate an article, we annotate a story, then that's kind of when we start addressing, okay, what is the purpose, audience, persona, and argument? So take out your notebook. As always with these lectures, you should always be taking notes because one, it helps us focus, it helps us remember things, and it gives us a way for our brain to process and encode information in our own words so that we can store it outside of our brains and be able to review it as the semester goes on. Because I can guarantee you, we are going to be using this stuff a lot, and you have to remember how to do these things. So we are talking about annotating. There are three stages of annotating a text. The first is the before stage, and this just simply looks like previewing the text, right? It's your first impression of a text. All of us have first impressions of people that we meet, right? Oh, that person looks like they're an athlete. Why? Well, they're holding a basketball or they've got a sports bag. Oh, that person's a brunette and they have blue eyes. And you know what? They seem like an extrovert because they're smiling and waving to people and talking and they speak a little bit louder. Or hey, that person's an introvert because they're sitting by themselves. They're not necessarily going out of their way to see people, right? We judge people based off of the sound of their voice or how much they talk or how quickly they talk, right? So just as we make assessments based off of a first impression when meeting somebody, that's what we're doing with a text. And we can do this a couple of ways. We can, and let's see if I have an article here. We look at the title. What does the title say? So I'm looking at a title and it says, having your smartphone nearby takes a toll on your thinking. So automatically I know that this article isn't about zoos or giraffes or zebras or global warming. I know that this article has something to do with not only smartphones, but also how they affect our thinking. So based on that title, I'm also thinking, well, this is probably going to be more of a negative version, or maybe they have negative bias towards smartphones, right? Because obviously, if it affects our thinking, that's probably not the best thing, right? So that's me previewing the text. I'm looking at the title. I'm also going to look at the sources. How many authors wrote this? Who wrote this, right? Is this CNN, Fox News? Is it BuzzFeed? Is it a post from Facebook? This actually says Harvard Business Review, and it also tells me the date, March 20th, 2018. Would we trust a technology article from 2007 as much as we would trust one from 2018 or even 2020? Probably not. So that kind of gives us an idea, right? Harvard published it. That's a reputable research institution, so I can probably trust it. It's also a little bit more recent, 2018, and it says that there's four authors: Duke, Ward, Neat, and Boss, right? So that also may be telling me it's a little bit more balanced. I'm going to look for headers and subheaders. I don't see any subheaders or bolded things on here, so that's not necessarily something that stands out to me. But if there's charts, if there's images, my first impression or my first glance would be, okay, if there's a chart, probably has some scientific data on here. If there's an image, who's in the image? What do they look like? Is this going to be a happy article, a sad article? That's what we have to do because it allows us to get our heads wrapped around what can I expect from the article. And in that, we can make predictions. And we can also say, do I have background knowledge of this? I think a lot of us have smartphones. So I think there's also like an automatic connection to, well, I'm curious because I have one. So what are they going to say about how it's affecting my thinking? And again, you should be taking notes on all of this, not just what's on the screen, but what's being said. So that's before. The second phase is during. And this is what we're going to talk about in a couple of slides. It's called reading with the grain and reading against the grain. And again, we'll get to that later, but I'll focus on the descriptive outline. Once you read, once you annotate, you also want to be able to say, okay, this is clearly the introduction. This is clearly where they're presenting their evidence and their research. This is the conclusion and the call to action. If you can be able to, as you're going through, see how the author has structured their argument and their flow of thoughts, then it's going to be easier for you to understand exactly what's being said and how. And then finally, we get to the after. We've already done our before, right? We've previewed the text, we've made predictions, we've seen if we had background knowledge, we've annotated the crap out of this thing, and we've come up with an outline. And the after is, okay, now that I know about this article, now that I've done my thinking, now it's time to look. What is their purpose? Who is their audience? How do they want to come across? And what is their argument? And then I would write a summary, right? Because again, the summary is the best way for checking. Do I understand this? What is this saying, right? We can read the summary without having to reread the whole article. And again, the purpose, audience, persona, and argument is stuff that we learned a couple class periods ago. And if you were absent, the video is recorded on Google Classroom. Okay, so that's before, during, and after. So moving on. This is the during part, right? This is phase 2 of our annotating process, and it is reading with the grain. So I want you to think, because this is what they're referring to when they put with the grain or against the grain. They're referring to woodworking. So when you're sanding something down or you're working with wood, going with the grain with how the wood is naturally flowing, I mean, this is really not the best word for it, that is easy. This is usually what people do on either their first read, right? So they'll read it once, and all you're trying to do when you're going with the grain is to just understand what are they saying, what is their evidence, what is the language that they're using, what is the author intending. So you are literally just essentially buying in to everything the author is saying, and you're just trying to understand their argument. Just in real life, this is probably one of the best ways to talk or to discuss something with a person you don't agree with, right? If you automatically come at them and say, well, you're wrong because this, and this, when you haven't taken time to understand what they're saying, why they're saying it, or how they're saying it, then you lose the argument right there, right? Because automatically there's a barrier. It's like you're not even trying to understand me, and therefore what gives you the right to, if you don't understand my argument, go against me, right? It's the same thing with reading an article. What are they saying? Understand their arguments, right? So then the opposite of that, and usually this is the second time somebody reads things, is you are now going against the grain. So it's a bit harder, it's a bit more rough as it would be when you were working with wood. So you're looking for the contradictions. Where are they silent? Do they have faulty logic? Are they making large generalizations? Do they have a bias? Do they have all the information? Where's their evidence for some claims that they might not have evidence for, right? So you're closely examining the claims that are being made in order to just challenge them a little bit, right? Now, say you agree with everything in an article. That's awesome, right? But you still want to be a critical thinker who can say, okay, even if I totally agree with this person's political opinion or scientific opinion, what would the potential flaws in the argument be? How would somebody else go against and challenge what's being said? Even if you totally agree, you still have to be thinking against the grain because that is what critical thinking is. Strong readers are able to do both at the same time. And normally that's kind of how our brains function, right? We're like, okay, well, this is what they're saying, but I don't agree with it. So the more and more that we practice this, the easier it's going to be in order to go and do both at the same time. Okay. So again, review any parts of this video that you need because this is how we are going to be annotating throughout the entire year.